All right, everybody, it's our Klaus here, and I'm incredibly excited to present this information to all of you today. And there is so very much to go over that I feel it's best that we really just delve right into things today. And so we're going to be talking about Joe Rogan in this presentation, and I am going to make one hell of a case for you stating that he is an incredibly carefully crafted pawn for the elite to normalize certain lines of thinking, as well as just be their overall puppet and good boy for a nice narrative of certain events. But so, in tracing all of this out for you today, I do want to give you an indication of why he even came onto my radar here. So, as you can see, I have a screenshot from the recent podcast featuring the great strawman Alex Jones. And as you can also see, it is nearly 5 hours of these two just moronic gatekeepers bantering about God knows what. I could not care less. It's again, they're doing their jobs. Rogan is worth over $30 million. All right. And Jones is, I think, somewhere around 11. But with that in mind, they're not going to be talking about shit that they're not supposed to when they're receiving that kind of money, when they're sitting at that table. But of course, this video getting a ton of people looking at it, this and that. And I came over here just to wet my beak. And I honestly could not get more than 5 or so minutes into their quote unquote discussion. And the reason was because Rogan continually referred to people who think critically about events such as 9/11 as being schizophrenic. And that really bothered me on a fundamental level. Now, part of why that bothers me so much is because for a number of years I actually worked in community mental health, and so I can tell you from that ground level experience that when somebody is diagnosed with schizophrenia, it is a curse put upon their head. It completely changes the way that society interacts with them and how they are. It's just the very literal sense of words as magic. Again, because that's all those are. They're given this label, and everything in their reality changes based on others' perception of them. And I don't agree with the DCM, or excuse me, the DSM or the ICD, but that's a whole other bit there. What I do want to say is that of sound body and mind, Joe Rogan, you have no fucking right to call people schizophrenics who are critical thinkers. When you start to really trace out that narrative, it is normalizing the dismissal of people questioning authority. It is absolutely what he's getting at there, because again, people with that diagnosis are often completely disregarded and disrespected. And that is what Joe Rogan wants for people who question things such as 9/11. Now, another thing that really got my goat with him calling people such names is this is somebody who regularly injects himself with human growth hormone and testosterone, as well as advocates and consumes nootropic drugs, again, literal mind altering drugs, which we're going to talk about a little more later on. And then, of course, you have his whole sordid history with rampant psychedelic usage. And again, I don't have any particular issue with using psychedelics, but I do believe that there is a proper way and a limit to how much of them should be indulged in. Again, that is another conversation, but somebody like that going around calling people who think critically schizophrenic is completely unacceptable. And again, this is somebody who touts himself as this enlightened individual who just sees through all of the bullshit, and yet is sitting here and talking down to those who don't agree with him, and his keepers, because he's being a good boy in protecting their garbage narrative of how they want things to be remembered. But so all of that aside, I mean, we're really going to break down this guy today in some fascinating ways. But one other thing I kind of wanted to hone in on here is that I notice it's becoming very common to call somebody a schizophrenic when they don't agree with them. So I have this comment here from my Trump, Blaine, Dumbo video that I highly, highly recommend you look into. But in it here, you have this individual who said, what is very clear to me is that he, Blaine, has no connection to Donald Trump whatsoever. And anyone that's trying to act like he does is completely on methamphetamine and is a paranoid schizophrenic. So anyhow, you can go into my comments there where I address the hideous nature of that sort of language being used. But again, reference this person back to an actual clip where I show them Blaine and Trump standing next to each other, shaking hands, all the things, and yet they accuse me of seeing something that they don't feel is there, even though it is directly presented to them. And this is the same thing with Rogan and his dismissal of 9/11 and whatever else he wants to be a good boy and uphold the narrative of. But so, again, you have this idea of a total reversal there, where the person who is seeing things for what they are is being labeled as somebody who does not. I want to show you this quick excerpt here from a Terence McKenna speech that he was giving a while back. And again, I really do appreciate a number of the things this man says, but he, just like Rogan and all of these other people, is a pawn in their scheme. Again, there's inspiring words that come out of him, out of Rogan, even out of Jones, but you have to look at the core of what the intention is that is giving them that platform. And when it's in congruence with this new age and ushering it in, it is not something for you and me. So take a listen here, and I apologize for the audio quality on this one though.
Any kind of natural conclusion. Schizophrenia is just a catch-all term for mental forms of mental behavior that we don't understand.
Forms of mental behavior that we do not understand. And again, Rogan probably does understand. But again, he's making $30 million a year, and he's going to, of course, say whatever they want him to. But now let's really, with all of that out of the way, let's really get into breaking down Joe Rogan. And I'm going to get to his birthday and all of these numbers that I know are jumping out at a lot of you. But I want you to see here that he relocated to Los Angeles in '94 and got his major break by signing an exclusive developmental deal with Disney, and then appeared as an actor on several of their television shows. And anybody who gets their start or is majorly affiliated with the House of Mouse is not a trustworthy character. That should be obvious at this point. That should be painfully obvious at this point. But so take a look at this. I want you to see this article that was released on the same day, actually, that Rogan had Jones on his show. It's actually the same day as the Michael Cohen spectacle as well. But this article looking at Rogan's net worth, and again here you can see that 30 million is still, according to some, and conservative estimate on how much his true wealth really is. So I'm really just reiterating to you that point of Rogan being at this big table with all of these other elites that are not allotted that sum of money unless they have shown that they can keep their mouth closed. But so take a look at the left side of your screen here. Let's start establishing some baselines in our numbers. So the Joe Rogan podcast began in 2009. So of course that is 10 years ago. You can see on the right side of your screen I have pulled up for you some of the information regarding the number 10. Again, we have been discussing it immensely in these past several videos, but now notice as well that the YouTube channel of his began on January 11th, and then that was actually in 2013. So of course 4 years later, and again we've been discussing the number 4. I will pull up for you on the right side of your screen, but thinking about that date, the 11th day, remember 11, a chief magic number, and the number of points on the Clifford, the tree of death, the energies driving us towards destruction. And again, the first month, but that gives us that nice triple one. And as we have discussed many a time, the English value for that is the 666, which you can also see now on the right side of your screen. So now looking back to the left, PowerfulJRE, that is the YouTube name for Rogan's channel. And very easily here you see Saturn Cult, Skull and Bones, the Path of Resh, these huge pieces that we have been tracing out. Again, references to serpents, the Rosicrucians, we have our Walt Whitman references, and it really does go on and on. But I've talked about all of that so much, and we have a tremendous amount of information to get into. So take a look here. I do want to reiterate Rogan having the same simple value, that 55, as Dumbo and the New Age. And again, that reference to Dumbo, New York. Remember, elephant is an anagram for the plane, and you must watch that video. Now take a look here. JRE has a simple value of 33. And with that, not only do we have reference to the word magic and amen, but what I really want to hone you in on, since we've been looking at that 33rd edition of The Economist's World In, is that when we mirror the word amen, it becomes NEMA. So we've talked about this organization in the past, but I want to do a refresher. So notice here says the National Emergency Management Association is a nonpartisan, nonprofit association dedicated to enhancing public safety, by improving the nation's ability to prepare for, respond to, and recover from all emergencies, disasters, and threats to our nation's security. So, of course, that leaves us wanting to learn a little more about what their involvement is. And you can see over here that they have been continually elevated in importance since the 9/11 attacks. And so again, yet another piece that served to facilitate. But you can also see here their connections to strengthening FEMA, and down below, note that they are recognized as a credible resource and routinely invited to testify before Congress and provide input on legislation and national policy development. So it's a big deal organization. It's a very big deal organization. I want to point you to this giant red flag on the right side of your screen here, and it would be their state's building address at 444 North Capitol in DC. And so, of course, we have talked about the 444 quite a bit. You can see on the right side of your screen, and let me pull up the most recent one so that you can get that connection there. And again, you can see the connections not only to Thelema and the ideas of head-mind control, but also the major deities, Jesus, Lucifer, Muhammad, on and on. Of course, we did discuss Jay-Z's 444 album and the story of OJ in the Dumbo video as well. A lot of very interesting predictive programming in that video. But so, getting back to this over here, and that 444 is just going to be coming up all throughout today. I want to show you one other thing here, and that is their forum that is coming up this year. So let's see if we can get this loaded up. So you can see that it is taking place here on March 29th through April 2nd. Now, if I can pop back over here, I do want you to remember that the 88th day of this year is March 29th. And again, I talked about that in connection to the new Dumbo movie actually being released on that day. And again, all of this is getting to the idea of Trump being the elephant in the room. But what I really want to draw your attention to is if we go back here to NEMA and we check out their initiatives tab, again, giant red flag, especially when it has that sex magic symbol here. But I want you to see, in getting us ready to look at their coding here, a number of things. When we look at this is their current seal. EM is emergency management. That is the 5th and 13th letter. If we add those together, we get the number 18. And as always, all of this is in reverence for the moon. But you can, of course, see the crescent down here and then the sun on the opposing side. Again, this idea of uniting dualistic forces. And, of course, the 3 stars with 5 points, giving us that nice 15, again, reference to the Devil Tarot card. But so now take a look down here as well. I want you to see this. Their classic logo, the civil defense icon. The letters C and D, of course, added together for our Divine 7, housed inside a triangle, providing a universal sign of the efforts to protect citizens against a nuclear war. And so, of course, that triangle is also inside of a circle, and that is an incredibly important symbol that I broke down back in my Alcoholics Anonymous video. But so now, look to the left side of your screen here, and if you look at the coding for emergency management, I want you to see a number of things. First of all, the reference to nuclear holocaust, and that logo is what they wanted to be burned into your mind in connection with nuclear war. But you'll also see here references to the real Illuminati agenda, 33 RAM, and then you have here presidential alert and the singularity. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because it made me think back to the video I did a couple years ago on the very underrated sci-fi movie, The Lawnmower Man. And in that film, you have a rogue form of artificial intelligence who is aiming to break out past his limitations and bring chaos to the world. And he says that when he accomplishes this, all of the phones in the world will be ringing in unison. And so in connecting presidential alert to the singularity, of course, we did just have the first ever, and again, this is in connection with FEMA, who is in connection with NEMA, presidential alert going out to phones. And again, you can read up on this. It took place at 218, which is definitely a number that I will hone you in on here because we have talked about it in the past. But do notice that it gives you those references to 9/11 Part 2, the stock market crash, and our number is 11. Again, the importance of this is hard to overstate. And so pieces of that will continue to come up throughout this video, but now notice as well here the reference to Isaiah 13:5. And if we take a look, and I guess even before we get to that, let's cover the 33 RAM. As I have discussed from Crowley's Book of Lies, chapter 33 is entitled Baphomet. And again, that would be this figure here, solve et coagula, dissolve in coagulation. This idea of building something up to understand it and then breaking it apart to actually be able to rebuild it in its strongest form. It's what we're seeing right now with the world as they get ready to dismantle it and rebuild it in its greatest form. But again, the connections to that number, to the Devil Tarot card, and furthermore to this idea of understanding when you actually trace out the origins of the word Baphomet, as you can see down below here. But now let's break into this Isaiah 135. Give me one moment here. Okay. So again, this is coming from the emergency management coding that we have reference to this chapter and verse, and you can see it is from a section titled An Oracle Concerning Babylon. And in the verse referenced, it says they are coming from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath to destroy the whole country. Now, the odds of that being the chapter and verse that come up out of this emergency management is completely staggering. And something I want you to think about, because we've talked about the number 135 so much, is that is the number for Rod Williams. Again, the prophet from Get Out who warns of the second 9/11 being on some geriatric shit. Again, the TSA agent, all the things that I have discussed with you regarding that individual. But now take a look down here, back to the left side of your screen, and when we look at the coding on an oracle concerning Babylon, you can see it shares values with Brotherhood of Saturn as well as Temple of Understanding. Now again, this is connected to all of my Get Out research, But look, their location is 777 United Nations Plaza. All right, so just like we see that divine triple digit there, it's the same, no coincidence, when we see the 444 for the location of NEMA. All right, you have to take stock of those and look into that actual organization, because it's really something else. But now as well, here you see fall of the United States, as well as trauma-based mind control and the end of days nuclear war. So all of that, again, very stunning to see in connection here. You can see the reference to October 28th, first day of the 44th week. Again, another incredibly important number we've already discussed at length. But I want to loop back here, because emergency management also references April 14th. Now this is a really big deal, because in my previous video we discussed Pink Floyd's The Wall, and this is the still shot from the very last scene in that film, in which you very clearly see this child pouring out a Molotov cocktail, but the number 414 and the letters CWR. And again, we looked into that, and CWR, if you add those letters together, do give you the number 44, and one of the possible abbreviations is Crusade for World Revival. But what I want you to also bear in mind is that when we looked at those letters and numbers written out, you can see on the right side of your screen here the connections to President Trump and the second 9/11 terrorist attack, and history repeating itself. Now, there's a tremendous amount, and again, I just encourage you to go watch that video. But you can also notice here the reference in just 414 for false flags and snakes. Now, I also want you to see that Do America, and we'll come back to that later. But also of note here is, if we look to history, the date April 14th was actually the date that Lincoln was shot by Booth, and I found that to be quite interesting, because of course he died on the 15th, and so that is the date, I feel that is often held in connection with that event. But so let me pull all of this up for you really quick. I want you to see, and again, this is one of the most told stories in our history, but they discuss on April 14th Booth masterminding a plan to assassinate Lincoln, Johnson, and Secretary of State William H. Seward, so that they could throw the U.S. government into complete disarray. Now again, over here you can see them keeping that 44 connected very heavily here, the caliber of Booth's pistol. But then also Booth leaping onto the stage and exclaiming "Sic semper tyrannis," thus ever to tyrants. Of course, they were in Virginia, the 10th state to be admitted into the Union, and their actual seal does have the king being smoten by a very androgynous looking figure. And again, that sword, the phallic placement, the dress, all the things that we could say, but all of that is absolutely a big deal to hone in on. Now we're going to come back to talking about this later, because all of these numbers and the way that they add up are quite fascinating. But let's go back. So I've got some other bits for you there that you can look through, but I really want to get into discussing Joe Rogan, because we're about half an hour in, and we've only had minimal discussion on him, and he really is supposed to be our centerpiece. So let's go back and let's look at his logo some more. So the two things that jump out at you first here that caught my eye are the lightning bolts and the third eye. So let's start with the lightning bolts. Now again, these are no stretch being connected to Hitler and his Reich. I want you to see here the Schutzstaffel actually had these two lightning bolts as their flags, and these runes come from reverence for the sun. And so again, in thinking about all of this in connection with 2019, the 19th year of this new millennium, the 19th tarot card, the sun, all of this is incredibly important. And of course, what really grabs me here is that this group was formed on April 4th. Again, the same day that David Blaine is born, that the World Trade Centers are open, that a whole list of NASA things have come up on and we've talked about. But that 4-4, always rearing its head. All right, so again, thinking about those lightning bolts, referring to the Schwarz Sohn, the black sun. Again, another concept that's come up here quite a bit. But what I also want you to see is that when we're looking at this third eye on his head, I automatically think of this. And especially since JRE equals 33. And this is who is referred to in chapter 33. And the third eye, of course, awakened on his forehead. But take a look at the dots going around. And so you have 10 rows. Again, there's your 10. Now, there's a few ways, and I can see that I'll probably get some shit on this one. But each row would have 5 dots on it. And so if I were to entertain the ones in his eyebrows not having those 5s, instead of 50 total dots, we could see 2 here and either 3 or 4. So that gives us either the number 44 or 45. Again, Trump is our 45th president, and I've talked enough about 44. But I will go with all 5, so 50. And again, thinking about JRE, the connections to NEMA, 50 states, 50 dots. So if we drop that though, take a look at the left side of your screen, 10 rows, 5 dots, put those numbers together, drop the 0, and you have 15. There's our devil card again. Now if we look at that number as a 105, things get really interesting. So first off, we have our reference to Jordan Peele. Now, I have discussed this man at length as he is the director of Get Out, which has been the center of many of my presentations. But I want you to hone in on his new movie that is going to be released, entitled Us, and of course on March 22nd, that nice Skull and Bones 322. But you can see revolving around a beach house and a family being stalked by a group of strangers referred to as the Tethered, keep that in mind, who look exactly like them. So hold that whole concept in mind, because that's going to come back towards the end of this video when we're talking about Trump in an SNL appearance. But I also want you to see here that Peele said that this movie was inspired by a Twilight Zone episode called Mirror Image. And again, I did that whole video explaining that barcode for you from the Economist cover, but that also showed you the connections to the final episode that Michael Scott was on The Office. And again, I'm just going to redirect you because there's way too much fascinating stuff for me to try to sum up right here. So Again, all of that very tightly interwoven. But so the other thing that really, just while we're on that Us movie real quick here, caught my eye is that in that trailer, this kid is wearing a Jaws t-shirt. And so, of course, on the right side of your screen, still pulled up, you can see in this coding that connects to the coagula procedure, again, from Get Out, and all of these other bits with Trump in the second 9/11, you have the tagline for Jaws, which is "Don't go in the water." Now, I've discussed at length the symbolism of that film, and you should check out the NEMA video that I put out on that. But what I really want you to see as well was something that was brought to my attention by Brock Henderson here, but that Jaws 19 appears in one of the Back to the Future movies. And again, you can see it shares that coding with "Behold the Coagula" and global economy. So again, all of these bits for mind control, all of these bits for an economic collapse. But so let's hone back in over here. Left side of your screen with that simple 105, you got references to 9/11, Alex Jones, and the Dow Jones, as well as masonry and sudden death. Now, since this is coming up, let's start looking at some of the more interesting connections between Joe Rogan and Alex Jones. And so this really caught my eye. This was back in 2001. They appear on this special Live from the Belly of the Beast together. Now, if you take a look at the left side of your screen here, you can see I have written out for you that this was released 85 days after 9/11. And why 85 is highlighted is because it is actually the simple value for Joe Rogan, as you can see now on the left side of your screen. But so, how very stunning. Now, of course, if you were to continue going through, you could look at how all of this further connects in with the Goodbye Michael Scott episode. But I also want you to pay attention to this special coming out on December 4th, because that is Jay-Z's birthday, and he released the blueprint on 9/11 that very year. So again, all of that incredibly fascinating to me. But now, keep going. When we look at Jones on Rogan's show, if you watch the 911th episode, Rogan makes it very clear that it was intentional to get Jones on for that episode. And so that's showing you that he is paying attention to that sort of, again, reference. But so now notice here with the more recent one, if we subtract those numbers, you can see some numerology here that leads us to the number 132. And I'm going to ask you to hold on to that number for a moment. But so you can see here as well that I have a whole set of different ways of breaking down the numerology for these appearances. But what is very fascinating is that no matter which road you go, you get numbers that are in reference to the elephant in the room coding. And that is incredibly, incredibly telling to me. But so, take a look at that, and again, let that resonate, because that is a lot to take in when you start to see how heavily that is all connected. I'll scroll up just a little more for you there. But so now the other thing that I want to put on the table here, and this is a commonality between Rogan and Jones, right? As I've got saying over here, is they're not just trying to control your mind with their words and their propaganda. They're actually using supplements as well. And so, of course, Alex Jones has his whole supplement network that everybody's aware of, 33% off, all that good stuff. But I want to hone you in on the company that Rogan backs called Onnit. and a product in particular called Alpha Brain. It says clinically studied to help healthy individuals support memory, focus, and processing speed. And so if we look through the web page for this, he's just, got all these great graphics and life on the go, attractive people, gives you a definition so you know what it is. But look at this, because this bothers the hell out of me, and how he's clearly manipulating you visually here. So for their memory metric, they show what looks like a huge boost in vocabulary over a 45-day period of taking this supplement. But if you're actually paying attention to the numbers on this axis, you can see that at the end of 45 days, the individual has barely learned 2 new words. So how on earth one could justify not only the cost, but also the effects, the irreversible effects largely that this has on the brain as well, is beyond me. But again, it's because somebody like Joe Rogan is giving his backing to it, and he just knows and talks to so many people and must be so enlightened. Let's see what he has to say about it. It seems to fire up your brain at a higher RPM level. I feel like it helps me form sentences better. And again, bro, I've worked in, like I said earlier, community mental health and chemical dependent. I think Rogan's got many chemical dependencies at this point in his life. I feel like it helps me form sentences better. For fuck's sake, Joe. You gotta get some help. You gotta clear up off of all this juice. So let's take a look at what's helping him form those sentences better. And let's look at some of the potential dangers associated with nootropic drugs. Because this is really important, because Rogan is advocating for a generation to not only fry their mind with psychedelics, but to also fry it with the use of these nootropic drugs. So take a look at this here. I mean, and I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but I do want you to see that some researchers have speculated. I know, give me some nootropic, right? Oh, fuck that. Speculate that certain brain regions may shrink or expand based on nootropic usage. Additionally, it is unknown how the brain responds when a person takes a nootropic for an extended period of time and then discontinues it. Even the safest nootropics can change the way your brain works, possibly inhibiting important functions. And this gets at the big key here, in that these drugs have not been tested long term in humans. All right, everybody, this is a total gamble if you are messing with these things. All right, you can see it takes a toll on your nervous system, creates a sense of dependence and inability to perform, memory impairment. And again, you can see here that the neurotransmission in your brain is affected by this use, depleting you of certain neurotransmitters and creating that need to take the drug in order to function. And so again, you can even see that it creates perceived deficiencies. So again, even when there's a capability there, it inhibits you from actually being able to embrace your potential because of the damage done by these drugs. And so again, though, but Rogan's getting paid, right? He wants that money. And if you go back here and you finish looking through this, at the very top, that first statement we read, it wanted you to see this, which says these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Again, it's another just bullshit organization through the government, but all the same, a gatekeeper that a lot of people are really comfortable having involved with these sorts of products. Product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So he's sitting there getting all that money off of that endorsement stuff too, all right? But let's bring it back. So let's go back to 2001 here. So it was a big year for Rogan, right? Not only did he have that special with Jones come out, but he also began hosting Fear Factor. And I shit you not, he was 33 years old when that show premiered on June 11th of 2001. And so, I mean, that in and of itself, right? But if you look at the period of time from June 11th to 9/11 is 93 days. And what's so very interesting is that Fear Factor has a simple value of 93. Okay? But before we get down to that, I do want you to see that 93 days can also be seen as 13 weeks and 2 days. And why I emphasize that is that's the second 132 now that has come up in this video. And I just want you to see on the right side of your screen, these connections to kill Trump 135. Again, the numbers Isaiah 135 from earlier in this video. May 15th, the 135th day. And again, Dante's Divine Comedy shows us that 515 is an apocalyptic number. But then you also have here written out these numbers 193. Now, that is so very important because ringing in unison, what I told you from that lawnmower man bit earlier, has a simple value of 193. It's also the same as 2019 and Donald Trump, Dumbo, prophecy fulfilled, and America is destroyed. All right, so all of that, clear as day. But now, getting back to the left side of your screen, and remember Flight 93, that's the one that had the movie made about it. It's the plane that completely obliterated itself in the middle of a field. And again, what's to possibly question about that? We must be out of our minds if we don't believe that that is a completely organic event and actually happened. The fuck out of here. All right, the memorial for that is a 93-foot tall building, of course, and it did give them a good excuse to put a 93 on an American flag. Now, of course, that number very heavily connected to Crowley. It is the master thelemic number. But I want you to hone in on this as well, because June 11th is the day that Fear Factor premiered. And as I've been honing you in on, and again, this is from Library of Congress, but this old article back when the U.S. Constitution was being ratified, coming out on June 11th with the Latin phrase Reduit Saturnia Regna in the falling towers. And of course, that phrase, as we looked into, not only having some very troubling coding connected with it, but of course meaning the kingdom of Saturn returns. And so of course as well, the phrase on there, it will rife, having that same value as conspiracy. 88, that's also the same value as Abraham Lincoln, and 88 of course connected to Trump, as we'll get back to here in just a moment. Whew. And so with all of that being said, again, Fear Factor having that 93 value, that's really something else. And so also sharing that value, and again, because we keep talking about elephants, remember that Dakshayani was the oldest elephant in captivity who died at the age of 88 on the same day that Trump gave his State of the Union address entitled Choosing Greatness. Again, on the right side of your screen, you can see all of this information and how it really is starting to stack. Okay. But so now, let's talk a little more about Trump. We haven't really delved into him in this video, and you can see right down here some 88 coding if you've been curious about that. But so I want to talk about his appearance on SNL, and of course you can see some numbers from Fear Factor here. But so check this out. This is all the way back in 2004, season 29 of SNL, episode 16. Now, take a look at the left side of your screen. If we add 29 and 16, we get the number 45, like our 45th president, Trump. If we subtract those numbers, we get the number 13. And again, this is a number I've heavily connected to Trump and the Death Tarot card again, Transformation. And I highly recommend that Redwit video for that. But then if we add those numbers, 45 and 13, we get 58, as in he became the 45th president during the 58th presidential election. All right, so how very interesting. Now, in this particular episode of SNL, they have a skit discussing 9/11. I have this write-up over here that was talking about it being a really bizarre skit because it was so dry and on track with some conspiracy claims that most of it didn't seem like a joke at all. And again, this is several years after 9/11, so it's very interesting that we have Trump happening to host that show. And again, this is all to keep these pieces in your mind and associated together, Trump and 9/11. But taking it a step further, there was another skit in that episode called Fear Factor Jr. And so if you look over here, I could not find this skit anywhere. I looked and I could not find it floating around. I would have loved some images for you. But you see here the thing that Rogan, and it's not actually him, it's SNL cast, but the thing his character asks here is, the very first thing is, you know how to swim, right? And again, Rogan, it's no secret, was inspired by Bill Hicks. Again, an individual who had a very crass sense of humor, and one of his biggest bits was about Los Angeles being destroyed and given to the ocean. And so he had this joke about everybody learning to swim. Of course, we looked into the Tool song, and that references that. Maynard James Keenan, this whole pseudo-intellectual character that we've broken down a number of times. But when you look into the other things on here, it's just really troubling. Just some of the stuff that seems to be going on. It says Joe Rogan hides young children under a bed and pushes plates of strange animal carcasses to them. And the announcer goes, "You haven't seen fear till you've seen it through a child's eyes." And then the next bit with Rogan here is this question and answer game. And of course, there are 10 questions. And he says, anytime you're wrong, this tank containing your pet retriever will fill up with 20 gallons of water. And so, of course, the 20th tarot card is the Aeon card, the Judgment card. But when we look at this in an occult sense, right, the dog is in water, so it's mirrored. And so what Rogan's character in this is doing is drowning the child's god in front of her. And again, we could really break that down, but I want to go back here and look at this coding for that, again, Fear Factor Jr. And so you can see the 444 written out, and again, bringing us back to our NEMA bit and their location in DC. But you'll also see here references to the Master Builder, Trump ending America, Trump dying. Of course, the number 168, which is connected to the Enough is Enough card. Again, the Illuminati cards that have Trump being kind of sized up by a sniper. But so Again, you can see all of the bits there. But and I'll hone in on this real quick because I thought it was so weird. In my previous video, somebody had referenced me needing to call gematria fake news, and that he had been talking about the date of August 11th. And so as you can see here, that those are both coded the same. And I don't want to go too far off the rails here, but nah, man, that guy ain't my cup of tea. I looked into him several years ago, and it became all too clear to me that he's bad news bears. And I think one of the easiest ways to really think about that is, this is all I think about when I hear him.
Find my book! Find my book! Find my book! Find my book!
Right? And you should be so honored to be able to buy his book. So the arrogance and the money seeking, and then touting himself as being just, again, this holier than thou figure that we should just be commending left and right and supporting as much as we can. And, this is a big part of why I don't monetize my channel or make any money off of this, is because money is the root of this system, and a huge piece, arguably the biggest piece that gives it so much power. And yes, I know that we all need money to get by, but in making it, we shouldn't be taking it from each other. We should be doing things that actually benefit our community and our society in real tangible ways, right? Not just sitting there in your living room getting stoned and following the daily headlines. There's really not much intuition there. And then acting like that is some great divine gift that we should all be so grateful for. And again, it's not how you, and again, look into something like Patreon. Look who's really getting paid when you support those sorts of things and people with those accounts. I would highly caution against anybody utilizing one of those. Again, I will never, ever associate monetary value with this channel. And it's not why I do this. Anyways, to prevent myself from going too far off on a tangent there, take a look here though, because that August 11th date, that was the day that Joe Rogan was born. Okay, and of course 8 times 11 giving us that nice 88, connections to false flags, Get Out, you name it. So also worth noting is that time and again, Rogan is shown as beginning his comedy in August of 1988. So of course we can very easily see that 888 from the 8th month, 88th year of that century, on and on. So the right side of your screen help you kind of connect some of those dots, which we have talked about very extensively. But so getting back to this SNL episode though, because there is a reference to Trump killing himself. I know this is weird, but again, this connects us back to the Us movie from Jordan Peele, where we have a double carrying out a murder against an original. And so you can see, I'm going to leave you the transcripts for this. And again, if I were to go over here, you can kind of see some of the imagery from there. But what's so very fascinating to me is that that sketch is called The Prince and the Pauper. And that has a simple value of 227. And so that links in with all of these other bits we're talking about, because Sic Semper Tyrannis, the words said by John Wilkes Booth when he shot Lincoln, have that same 227. And it's so interesting as well because Lincoln pronounced dead at 7:22 a.m. Again, an obvious mirror of that number. But now you can also see the connections to the Dumbo research, the full sturgeon moon. You also see here Beavis and Butthead Do America. And remember, I told you to keep in mind Do America earlier because it had that 414, sharing the same as false flags. But in that movie, the whole plot is them going cross country on a bus full of geriatrics and causing all sorts of destruction, opening the Hoover Dam, destroying this, destroying that. And they are trying to, it's like a disease that'll wipe out 5 states in 5 days, sorts of things, how they put it. Of course, the 55. But again, I think it's really interesting how that lines up with that movie. Again, Mike Judge, somebody we've talked about quite a bit. But so staying on track here, it's really worth noting that with that 227, it was 2 years and 27 days between the 2 Alex Jones interviews on Joe Rogan. So that is fucking fascinating. And again, you can see here the full sturgeon moon to take place on the 227th day. Again, you see how that's all connected. And the very last thing that I want to say with the SNL sketch is that it ends with this bit here that says poverty sucks. And this is after the fake Don Trump has the real Don Trump killed and buried in a swamp. But you can see the phrase poverty sucks has that simple value of 194. And remember, I told you to hold on to that at the very beginning of this video and its connection to that 414 number. And so again, that 194 value, September 11th, the planet Saturn, 1220, which is when that Beavis and Butthead movie was released. I shit you not. You also see Doomsday Prophet, and of course the reference here to Revelation 18. Now, a couple other things in looking at 936 written out. I do just want you to see that that is the English value for 666, 33, as above, so below. Again, Planet Trump, all of these other huge pieces. But it's very, very telling that that is written out. But notice here in Revelation 18, if we were to take a look at that, it is lament over fallen Babylon. And so again, you can see here, lament over fallen Babylon has the same value as 2019, Donald Trump buried alive, the divine understanding, that number 888, which if we mirror and add that simple value we get, and as I showed you not too long ago, is the coding for Donald J. Trump. Okay. So take a look here as well. 515, let's back it up. Poverty Sucks has that Lego Movie 2 coding. Now, in this movie, the plot revolves around a prophetic dream of the main Lego seeing a dolphin clock on the time 5:15, at which point all of the others are cast into the abyss. So if we look at the coding for 5:15 dolphin, there you have Donald John Trump, the Lawnmower Man, Judgment the Star, the 2 cards that are tilted back on that 2017 cover. Okay, all these other bits that we've talked about. Is very massive. I don't have that image up here for you because that movie's still in theaters and I really do not want this video pulled. But so let's round the bend here. This is really the last spread of information that I have that I want to share with all of you today. So some odds and ends here. So again, thinking about Rogan being born on August 11th, he appears in episode 118 of the show Just Shoot Me. And it's really interesting, of course, because it's season 6, episode 16. That is one of the beast numbers. If we pulled up for you Just Shoot Me, you could see again that coding on the right side of your screen connected to ideas of divide and conquer, the Willis Towers, on and on, or excuse me, Tower. But notice as well here that that episode was called A Beautiful Mind. Has a simple value of 138, just like Donald Trump, okay, on a show called Just Shoot Me. And again, as I always talk about with the Misfits Bullet EP in the song We Are 138. But so, again here, keeping that 118 in mind, it's kind of interesting that when we think about the images that were once behind Rogan here, you have these two very controversial musicians when it comes to their deaths. And of course, with Elvis on the left there, if you drop that 0, he's got the nice 515 hanging around his neck. Of course, the king, right? But so in thinking about this, right, those two are actually modified images. And he says that the only real mugshot is one of Rosa Parks, which we don't actually get to see. What's so very interesting is that Rosa Parks has a simple value of 118. And again, you can see the connections here to the storm, the number, or excuse me, great work, and the tethered. All right, that concept from the Us movie. Wow. It blows me away, man. Remember, 4/2 is going to be the day that the NEMA mid-year forum ends. But so just finishing things out here, there was a really interesting Rolling Stone article I was reading on Rogan. It's an interview. References all over the place, but it was weird they kept mentioning the goat's vagina. And so, of course, you can see here the simple value giving us the same as I am Saturn, and the king is dead. Bunch of other interesting pieces, and you also again get this reference right back to April 2nd. This is a very, very heavily coded date and number. 42 is one of the cursed numbers. It's connected to the chapter Dust Devils in Crowley's Book of Lies. Again, something I've talked about in the past. Now, notice here the full-on name for the podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, does give us references to Donald Trump 9/11, the Donald John Trump agenda. You also have this idea of 33 thoughts. Remember, JRE equals 33. But the other thing I wanted you to see, this was funny because it kept playing the fucking Dumbo clips when I was watching those SNL bits with Trump, is I do think there is a striking resemblance between Rogan and Crowley. And I think it's definitely somebody that they want to have in that similar sort of vein. All right, he's nowhere near as profound as Crowley. Excuse me, one moment. But I do absolutely believe there's something to be said there. So again, you can see here sharing the raptures, the all-seeing eye, and thinking back to Rogan's logo. But notice as well that it has that symbol of 222. And again, I'm going to redirect you to that Stork video, the Michael Scott one that I did. I think that could really be the most important video to watch in conjunction with this particular video today. Let me see if I can just pull it back here for you. There you go. All right, so you can take a look at how we get the 222s out of that. But in any case, you have the reference to the September 11 attack and impossible coincidences. All right, so again, you can see Joe Rogan's coding here. Age of Aquarius, Saturn's Satan, an antagonizer, an evil agenda. This is a business. All of these applicable pieces. Plan 9 is the record label that Misfits Bullet EP came out on. And notice here the very last thing that I want to show you would be Joseph James Rogan, his full name. And it shares coding with Harry S. Truman, again, the 33rd president who died at the age of 88, was the first one to give that bowling alley in the White House. And again, here you see the date September 18th written out. Remember, not only was that the same day that Blaine and Trump did their promo for the dive of death and everything I talked about with that, but as you can see on the right side of your screen, September 18th was the same day that the National Security Act was enacted. It was the same day the U.S. Department of Defense, CIA, and National Security Council were all established. Okay, it's a very big deal date we've talked about at extensive length. But so, again, you have your references to the Fed, Antichrist, and a sturgeon moon, again connecting us to that number 227. So on and on it goes, right? That is all that I have for all of you today. I really cannot thank those of you enough who are still with me here at the end. I know it's a longer video, but with this sort of information, as those of you know still here, it is worth the time to really explore how deeply interwoven all of it is. And, I do want to thank everybody who has been taking the time to comment. I am very far behind on my responses. I actually was just horrendously sick very recently here. And huge shout out to my wife for not letting me die. She's real good about that. But I will get to those comments. Again, I really appreciate y'all taking that time. And it does really inspire me to see this information resonating and so much more being contributed. As again, I love to see other people's relative sort of perspectives on all of this. But so, again, with that, I really hope that I showed you a compelling case as to why Rogan is somebody that should not be trusted, and why we should hold him accountable for that intolerant hate speech of his. And, at this point, I hope that the video gains enough traction so that he can hear me again of sound body and mind say, fuck you, Joe Rogan. You have no right to talk to people, to talk about people like that. All right, you don't. Just another pawn in their game. So with all of that being said, again, thank you all so very much, and please be well.